Hello, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's coming to you on the 20th of January 21. Time on deck is 11:34, 100 hours Central Standard Time. And again, I bring you today special guest, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. Dr. Pry is the director of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security. And he's also served on the EMP Congressional Task Force, has lots of experience in the areas of electromagnetic pulse defense, power grid defense. He is a weapons systems expert and historian. So Dr. Pry brings us a wide variety of background. He's got really good, strong, broad perspective on things. He can connect the dots that most people miss due to his depth in a broad, diverse area of big spectrum, but lots of depth in what he covers. So we're really fortunate to have him again today. He just published an article about Cybergeddon, and he's just been on the Vine show. So I'm going to bring him on in just a second. But guys, let me tell you, I bring you this as part of our eyes wide open and head on the swivel series, so you'll have an idea of what's to come, because the proposition of my channel, have to survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And so I'll tell you to subscribe to my channel, bang the update notification bell, and click all. We're going to make this a 30-minute interview or less today. I have to. Got to keep it short today, so it won't go too long. But by the way, guys, I got a real good special right now, because we're looking at the power grid going down. You're going to need long-term food storage. You're going to need food to get through the situation. Right now, I got a really good special. Very short-term, $150 off a 3-month supply of food that lasts 25 years. You got breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 2,000 calories a day, make you a winner. This is good stuff, guys, because it's lightweight. You can put it in your caches. Your kids can carry it around. And it's got the pouches inside that are easy to store and throw in your backpack. And so go to prepwithgreg.com, and you'll also find there's other prepping supplies available there at prepwithgreg.com once you go into the My Patriot Supply logo, and tons of other food storage options. Also, we got a $50 supply, $1 off, a $50 special on the 4-week supply, which you get 2 of those buckets. You get 6 for the 3-month. So there you go, get $150 off and $50 off. So that's a great deal, and it's a limited time, so check it out, prepwithgreg.com. So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Pry, as I mentioned, just was on the Mark Levine show, and he's also got this new article out on Cybergeddon, and he's done a lot in the area of power grid defense. He's come to Alabama three times working with me, and other times working with some other people. So he's a real champion in this area. Peter, tell us your top concern with everything going on today about risk to our cyber or to our power grid, especially given what's happening with Russia right now. What do you think? Where's our top risk?
Well, let me start off with some good news that happened today. Good. The former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has published an article today or yesterday in the National Interest, calling for 2 of our favorite projects to be implemented. One, that we, if necessary, we need to spend billions of dollars to harden our electric grid against EMP, because it's essential to our survival as a nation and it's essential to our military. And 2, he's calling for SDI-2, for bringing back the Strategic Defense Initiative and deploying space-based missile defenses. So our efforts, including your efforts, because there's been a handful of us trying to raise public consciousness about this, for many years, seem to be bearing fruit. When somebody of Pompeo's stature, brings this up as a national level issue that might become part of future presidential debates and the like, that's progress. That's progress. So I think we can celebrate that we've brought. When we started all this, I mean, EMP was still in the classified closet and most people hadn't known about it. We brought it out of the closet. We've educated people at the technology level, the scientists, then the general public. And now usually the last ones to know are the policymakers who make the decisions. And so we finally reached that level. So that's worth celebrating. My fear, and now here's the bad news, it might be too late to do anything about it, because Russia has given an ultimatum over this confrontation with Ukraine. Last week, they were giving us a week to make up our minds as to whether we were going to meet the demands of their so-called peace treaty. Yesterday, they decided to change that to 48 hours. So the Biden administration has 24 hours to accede to their demands. And then catastrophic, he has made two huge mistakes, the Biden administration. The first one, last Thursday, after the NATO and US discussions with the Russians failed to resolve the Ukrainian crisis, Russia sent a cyber propaganda message that to the Ukrainian government websites saying, be afraid, you know, the worst case is going to happen if this isn't resolved. And in response to that, and the Biden administration has been openly making threats to make cyber attacks on Russia to punish them if they invade Ukraine. And then in the aftermath, I think it was Friday, NATO and the United States, publicly announced they were sending cyber warriors into Ukraine. That should have not been made public. That should have been a clandestine operation. And it shows the stupidity of the administration and of NATO that they think of cyber as some kind of gray zone kind of form of aggression, that it's used for harassment, that it isn't a real weapon of war. But if you understand, if you've read my book, Blackout Warfare, or any of my articles and books, you should understand, yes, that our adversaries perceive, and they are correct, that EMP attack is part of cyber warfare for them. And so that if you talk about sending cyber warriors into Ukraine, for them, that's the equivalent of saying, well, we're sending nuclear missiles into Ukraine to protect it. It's an existential threat, to Russia if you're going to threaten to attack their critical infrastructures, and they might overreact to that when the 24-hour period is up. For sure, if they attack Ukraine, the tip of the spear is going to be a cyber attack to black out the Ukrainian electric grid. They can win the war that way. It's right in their military doctrine, because the Ukrainian conventional forces will not be able to operate without the electric grid. They won't be able to communicate without the electric grid. They won't be able to get fuel for their tanks or move their tanks on railway lines without the electric grid. And Russia will just be able to walk into Ukraine, and with relatively little fighting. If they are concerned about NATO and the United States trying to intervene, they might attack us. And that would include, since Putin is very aggressive and he believes in going big, that might include the whole 9 yards. Just last year, well, it wasn't even a year ago, I point out in my article, in the last Ukrainian crisis that we had in April 2021, the unofficial Kremlin spokesman basically warned us that that it was likely that if the US kept intervening and interfering in Ukraine, there would be a war between Russia and the United States, and that it would be a cyber war, and they would prevail in the cyber war. And they have a whole range of options that they could exercise. They could attack Harlem. They specifically mentioned Harlem in New York City and black it out to give us a pinprick, a sort of a poke to warn us off. They could be more aggressive than that. They specifically mentioned Florida, that they could black out the whole state of Florida. And I hope Governor DeSantis is listening to your show. He should be aware of that his state was signaled out for a threat last year. And so it's potentially could be in the crosshairs in 24 hours for a Russian blackout. Or they would go the whole way and just black out the whole United States and end us as a civilization. That all of these were options. And this was less than a year ago during the last Ukrainian crisis. So we've been warned. Interestingly, over the weekend, a member of the Russian Duma, and the Duma is basically Putin's puppet. So they are just like this, so all of this, these threats that are coming out of them are basically coordinated, with the Kremlin. But a member of the Russian Duma said to prove to the United States that Russia is willing to go to nuclear war over Ukraine, that they should launch a hypersonic warhead at Nevada and detonate it in the Nevada nuclear test area, give us warning so we could move people out of there. And that would demonstrate that our missile defenses are helpless against their hypersonic warheads, and that they can do basically whatever they want, and that they do have the political will to go to nuclear war over Ukraine. So that's our current situation. And the blunder of the Biden, the other thing, and this isn't in my article, but because it happened after my article was written, but I don't know if you caught Biden in his long rambling discussion last night. He basically said, I can't remember his exact words, but he's catching a lot of criticism, for saying during that presentation that that we are going to implode, that if Russia invades Ukraine, we're not going to intervene militarily, but we will apply all kinds of economic sanctions and everything. I mean, in effect, it was basically giving the Russians a green light to invade Ukraine because they don't care about economic sanctions. They demonstrated that with Crimea. We imposed all kinds of economic sanctions and against Russia for taking Crimea. Ukraine is a much bigger and they were willing to pay that price. So they'll obviously be willing to pay a much bigger price for Ukraine. What they've mainly been concerned about, obviously, and the reason they put up the peace treaty, is because they don't want to get into war with the United States if they can avoid it. If they have to, they're telling us they will go to war. But I think the Kremlin believes that the Biden administration is so weak that they can win without war. And they seem to be in the process of just doing that right now. So this is the situation we're in. We could be on the verge of what I call Cybergeddon, a catastrophic cyber and EMP attack that would happen against Ukraine, our NATO allies, the United States, if we play this wrong. And the Biden people are so incompetent, that they're sending mixed signals to the Russians, to compensate for his blunder last night. They took a harder line this morning, I understand.
I heard that last night. He was basically saying, well, if you go in and just take a little bit of Ukraine, it won't be such a big deal. Really?
Yeah, right. Something along those lines, right? Exactly. And they've also said that, well, maybe they'll provide Javelin anti-tank missiles and other support to Ukraine, but the NATO forces themselves won't come in to oppose the Russians. The Russians would be fine with that as well. I mean, that would not deter them from rolling over Ukraine. My other concern is if the tanks do start rolling following the cyber attack, that they might not stop at Ukraine. Putin's vision is to restore the USSR. They might roll right into the Baltic states, take over the Czech Republic, take over the Slovakia, all of these former parts of the Soviet Union. They've already, with China, gone into Kazakhstan. And I think that was a false flag operation right there. And they were signaling us about what they can do and what their political will is. Supposedly, the Russian troops went into Kazakhstan as a peacekeeping mission to put down an Islamic uprising and protests over rising gas prices. I don't believe that for a minute. I think Russia had its little green men in Kazakhstan that provided a pretext for Russia to send its troops into Kazakhstan. And China supported them in that and has also sent personnel to Kazakhstan, which proves, again, the Russia-China alliance that we're facing. So it'll be interesting to see if Russia pulls its troops out of Kazakhstan. Even if they do, the Kazakhs have gotten the message loud and clear, that the Russians can basically take over their country like that, and they will have Finlandized Kazakhstan. So for all practical purposes, it won't be an independent country anymore. Not that it's really been all that independent anyway, and that's a huge prize. Most Americans don't realize Kazakhstan is one of the largest countries in the world. It's very rich in minerals and resources, But another article I wrote before the Cybergeddon article is I think we're playing this thing all wrong. We should be trying to use this crisis as an opportunity to try to do what we were attempted at the end of the Cold War, to make Russia a strategic partner. You know, we face the greatest threat that we've ever faced in our history from the what I call the Sino-Russo-New Axis. You know, this combination of Russia and China is a formidable economic, nuclear, and military bloc, far more formidable than the original axis of World War II, more formidable than the USSR was. And we can't beat them. Our own war games show that we can't beat them. And China is becoming increasingly aggressive, you know, because of Russia, because of their alliance with Russia. Putin is their, I'm not exactly sure how to describe it. Putin can be the tip of the spear for them, because Putin knows, you know, he's built up this huge war machine, this powerful war machine. And a lot of people say, well, Russia's only got the economy the size of Venezuela. As people don't seem to understand that because Russia is weak economically and strong militarily, that makes them a more dangerous and more immediate threat to us, not a less dangerous threat. Putin knows that he's got a narrow window of opportunity, maybe a decade, where to use or lose this military superiority that has been built up at such great cost to him. And that is great from China's perspective, because Russia can be the bad guy. Russia can be the troublemaker, you know, and China can posture as if they're more moderate and more reasonable. And Russia can provide a distraction, you know, by, for example, if they go into Ukraine, there's a really, I think it's probably likely that China will then annex Taiwan and the South China Sea. You know, they know that we cannot prevail in a two-theater conflict. Our war games show we can't even prevail in a one-theater conflict against those prizes, Taiwan and Ukraine. So this is an extremely dangerous situation we've got, made all the more dangerous because I don't think there has been a more incompetent, in American history, I don't think there's been more incompetent leadership on the American side in our whole history, you know. And it's not just in the White House. I mean, you know, the Pentagon, the rot is going into the Pentagon. We've got these political generals in charge. We cannot afford to get into war because we're going to lose it with this team. You know, we need to buy time. We need to split the Russians off from China, try to turn them into a strategic partner. I actually think that when you actually go through their demands in their peace treaty, that many of their demands are reasonable and actually would help our own national security. You know, the Biden administration, though, probably doesn't want to look weak by acceding to any of these demands.
That's the problem. That's the problem we face right there, is that Biden has blown the future of his party so bad that he's liable to do things that he ought not do or ordinarily would not do to try to salvage his political party. He's putting the whole nation in peril. And I did have David Pine on my program. We talked about some of those things you just mentioned.
Right.
So we've covered that on the show. Peter, we got about 8 more minutes here. So what we're talking about here is we're at a real risk of war in Europe. It may expand because and people in Lithuania and Latvia are really concerned because they're next door to Belarus, and Russians are moving a lot of troops into Belarus. They're scared. Finland is scared right now. They're you know, we talk about being Finlandized. Well, the Finland people are scared right now. They're arming up. The whole area up there. These people are afraid for good reason, and Putin has got them generally scared. And we've got to worry that part of the ops or the coming out of Russia may be just to take the United States power grid down so that we won't get in the way.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Putin is like Napoleon, and he might go for everything. We had a scenario that the EMP Commission warned about in one of our reports. You know, if Putin did an EMP attack on the United States, you know, would paralyze our ability to project power, so we wouldn't be able to go and rescue NATO. And if they did an EMP attack on NATO Europe, you know, if they detonated a weapon at 70 kilometers altitude over Brussels, NATO headquarters, the EMP field would affect all of those, all of the countries that would be in the pathway to reaching the English Channel. It'd take them all out. It would basically create a red carpet of an indefensible area where the Red Army could just roll over it. And they've got 20,000 tanks. They could probably win a conventional war without the EMP. I don't think Americans realize how weakened NATO has become, because they've been freeloading on the United States. I mean, basically, the only thing keeping NATO alive as a credible, military alliance is our nuclear deterrent. It's not really defensible. Germany, for example, during the Cold War, they had, a couple of thousand tanks, main battle tanks. Germany today has 440 main battle tanks, just 440. If you add up all the main battle tanks and the aircraft and the numbers of soldiers along the pathway to the English Channel, Russia has got, very serious advantages in all of the categories. Plus, it's got a 10-to-1 advantage in tactical nuclear weapons.
Well, our only advantage is that our systems are more sophisticated with their sensors and guidance and navigation, with their weapon system pointing. But all that's vulnerable to an EMP, even though it should be rad hard. It's the testing of that is questionable. But the intercommunications, we rely on data fusion for our combat systems now. That would be at risk to an EMP. So the weapon systems themselves may or may not function, but the communications between commanders and the people in the field would be gone. And then there's our so-called warriors, the General Mark Milley. I call him Millie Vanilli, because he look what he's did with Afghanistan, and and I'm not impressed with their leadership in the Pentagon, including the Secretary of Defense, Austin. So we got about 5 minutes to go here. So we have a risk. The risk is real. The pistol is cocked and pointed and at us, and principally Ukraine right now, but it could be at us too. And our leadership is bumbling around. I've got a website people can go to, freedomrestorationfoundation.org. It's got an action center page where it tells everybody everything they need to know about how to find their congressional representatives in their House of Representatives, their senators, how to contact them, how to email them, how to call them, what to say. It's got a whole lot of resources there for that kind of stuff, including state legislators, Peter. So what would you recommend people do? Do you recommend people go there and call their Congress? What would you recommend? What other steps could my viewers do that might possibly help make a difference to avert a catastrophe?
Well, over the next 24 hours, what I would recommend people do is, if you've got a home generator, put it on manual setting, not the automatic setting. That'll make it more survivable to an EMP. I'd recommend, if you haven't stocked up food, go to the grocery store and buy as much of food as you can get, especially canned food. It'll last a long time and it's cheap. Water, you especially need water. Get bottles of water. If you haven't prepared and you have no preparedness at all, you should be focusing right now for the next 24 hours on posturing yourself so that your family will have some kind of a chance of getting through it if the worst happens. All right. And we should know in a few days, if the worst is going to happen or not. If it doesn't happen, then I would recommend, getting on, going to your state representatives and your governor, and because you're much more likely to be able to get a state electric grid, and your governor, especially if you live in a Republican state, you're much more likely to be able to persuade them to harden your state grid and make it survivable than the Biden administration in Washington. Do not wait for Washington to solve this problem. Washington is filled with Dr. Fauci types, and that's why Washington can't do anything anymore. But you should also contact your senators and your congressional representatives and send messages to the White House if you can. You might want to get one of my books. That book that you held up, Blackout Wars, has actually got an executive order in it, a blank executive order. It's only 2 pages long, and it's got a blank bill in it. All you have to do is fill in the name of your state. If you could get your governor to pass that executive order, or the state legislature to pass that bill, you would start your state on the process to getting protected.
So everybody will know what I have to talk from to see my face. This is the book he's talking about. I got this one from Dr. Pry. You can see you signed it. And this is an excellent book full of good resources. You can get it online. I believe it's still available at your website, Peter.
It's available from Amazon.com. Amazon.com. You just put in my name and Blackout Wars, and it'll come up.
Is it available as an ebook?
I think it is. I can't remember whether they turned it into an ebook or not. I think it is.
Okay.
Pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that they have returned all my books into ebooks.
All right, we're at the 1 minute mark here. So you got any final last words you want to say, Peter?
God help us. I would also, I would also pray that, that we get through this. This is a serious matter, very serious. This is, it's even the president, when he was asked his opinion, he said last night he thought the tanks were going to roll. This is his opinion. Good going, Joe. Let's pray that doesn't happen.
Amen. Amen. Well, look, we're in a dire situation. I don't know what they mean by their 48-hour warning, which ends in 24 hours. That's a good question. We will have to see how that's going to play out. I know he's still mobilizing a lot of resources, and they got a training thing with Belarus. I think it's supposed to take place the 10th or the 20th of February. So it could be tomorrow, or it could be a month from now. But anywhere in this time frame, we're facing real threats, people. And maybe we can put it off. Maybe we can negotiate something. I don't know. But get ready. Do everything you can. Prepare. That's what I urge everyone to do. So, Peter, thank you once again for coming on my show. We may have to do another quick follow-up to this. There's so much unfolding right now. The world is coming apart at the seams. I ain't never seen crazier times in my life. So, Peter, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure seeing you.
All right. You take care, and God bless. And hopefully we can do this again in not too distant future. Goodbye.
Take care, my friend.
All right, everyone. Take care, and Greg out.